So we can take one of the functions that we were working with previously. So let's stay with the getCircleArea function. And if I say that area is 100, this is in my global scope. And this is in my function scope. And so I'm just going to be logging area right now. Where is this console log? In which scope is the console log? So in the global scope, right? Let's just verify that we're doing, not here. So in the global scope, it's 100. And in here, because it's a different scope, we're not calling the function. GetCircleArea. Yeah. So we have the two variables that are the same, and that are named the same but are on different scopes. If I want to change area here to be something else, does this variable affect this in any way?
No.
It doesn't. So this will remain the same, and this one will change. And if we talk about, for example, let's say that we were doing this with var, and we want to see, actually, let's see what happens if we want to see what area it is, what area is in line 74 before we create area in our scope. What would that be? Assignment to constant variable. Can someone tell me what the problem is?
Because we are doing a different calculation and assigning it to area.
Let's read that error again slowly. Assignment to constant variable. So what does that mean?
Because it is constant, it cannot be changed, and it is changing inside.
It's actually, in which line do you think it's changing?
75.
It's landing in line 80. So we're going to say let for now. And now we get a different error. Cannot access area before initialization. So we're here. It's looking for a variable named area in my function scope. It's not there, so it will fail. Because let is conscious about scopes, but var isn't.
And const is not so conscious about scope.
Well, it won't let me do it now. So I'm going to comment all of this out now, but let's do this again slowly. If this is a let, I think this will tell me that this doesn't exist because it's not in my scope. Correct, it's not there. But if I say that this is a var, it will get leaked into the function scope. What is happening?
Where there you have the function open and
This is fine.
Because you're not calling the function.
Ah, yes.
it doesn't have any parameters, so maybe.
Yes, thank you. Yes. So this is in the global scope. Then let's do it again with let because now I'm not sure about anything. Yeah, so it will actually let me, it will leak into that. But if I create a variable here, I'm just going to call it A, and it's a 4. And if I say a equals 5 and then log 5, in which scope am I in line 81? Global scope. But I created the variable in function scope. So it did. Ah, yes. It's there. And so it is doing that. Will it let me, and will it let me do that with let? This is also creating a new variable, I think. Yeah, a is not defined now. And if this is changed to var,
No.
yeah, no.
Could anybody go inside and call it?
If I do this, this is also a variable assignment, right? So this is 5. This is difficult. What you need to take away with you about scopes right now is that we have function scopes and global scopes. And you almost never want anything to be in the global scope. We want stuff inside the function that you cannot reassign later on because you want it only for that purpose of the function. I'll come up with better examples.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is that what you did earlier by using let or where inside that get circle area, and you were calling it outside to just see that how it behaved. But is it a thing, or were you just showing us that it will not work if I do it like that?
I'm just showing that it won't work.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't matter where or let, right? Because
no.
yes.
But I thought it was different, to be honest. I thought that if we created the variables with var, they would leak into the functions, similar to what Abdu showed. But maybe it's just because of the scopes inside the if. So the example that we saw right now, where we only create the variables here. Remember that we say that's 5, and then we log x. If this was var, this was undefined. Remember?
Yeah, if it's a left, it will be a
Because this was being moved out of that scope to here, and that was undefined. And then when we were logging this, if this was a let, then it was like, what? X doesn't exist. But if it's a var, it moves it. So we can play around with this, with the if scope as well. So let's see, if I have let x equals 5 here, can I have a let x here that is 10? What would x be here, and what will x be here? I'll just write function scope and well, actually, block scope, function scope, and let's do let x equals 100, a global scope x, and we're gonna call it, yeah, this is all wrong now. So global scope 100, block scope 10, function scope 5. So we have 3 variables. They're all named the same, but they have different values in their scope. Can I change, if I don't say this, and I say that x is now 20, do you think this line 78 will be 20? Because it will be talking about, will it let me reassign it?
Yes.
Yeah. And if I say, so this is inside function scope. And if I say, I'm only changing the global scope. outside. Everything is contained. Our x's are contained in here. If we create variables here, let's do this one. If we update, create the variable in 76, and then we update it, before, if we remove this, it was updating variable created in line 74, right? If we add this one, will it update the variable created in 76 or in 74?
76.
Yeah, it only changed one, right? It updated the one in its block scope.
Yeah.
If it doesn't find it, do I have access to the function scope? Yes. So we're going to take that one. But it's not the same for this one. Here, we're not updating the variable that we created here. This is a new one. Because JavaScript lets you create variables this way as well. But this is equivalent to this, which we don't want. We want this. It may not seem super important right now. You'll get confused, you'll get some errors, and then you're gonna think, it's because this variable, I'm changing it in somewhere else, or something like that. Yeah.
I have a small question,
Yep.
or maybe it is a confusion. I don't know. But, we wrote it here. Let x is equal to 5, and inside if loop, we wrote it like let x is equal to 10, and if it was the example of let and let.
Yes.
Let above and let inside the if loop. What if we don't write let and let var let var? So what will overwrite it? I mean,
That's a good question. So you're saying if we have this 2 bars,
yes, or maybe var above and let.
it's the same.
Okay.
Actually, X has already been declared because let knows about scopes. Var doesn't.
So it will not let var take
Over the let.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what happened in the other way? If you have
They're
var
both
above and
they're
let
both in
inside?
the same scope. And we can't have 2 variables named the same in the same scope, right? So this one works because function scope, block scope. They're both named X, different scopes. Function scope, and this will not let me because this is setting its scope in the function.
And
Yeah.
it is narrowing it. Var is narrowing
Exactly.
it, so it will not let it do it.
No.
And in the other
Okay.
way, yeah.
It can only work like that. It will only widen the space, the scope, but it will not
Narrow
narrow.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think this will work because it's
Yes, it is widening the. I mean, it is giving it space.
Yeah.
Yes.
so they're in different scopes. And the other one is when we do like this, we're setting it in the same scope. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, huh?
Again, it's not crucial to fully understand it.
At least all the places outside HackYourFuture, they use var,
Because it's all documentation.
like bubble reaches to
Not
other videos that I took before. So now I'm just like saving the recording of it. I don't think I can resume it because I use something else. Yeah, we tried fixing the hooks, but it didn't work out, so I'm using something else.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm just waiting for it to save so I can start recording.
Do you have exercise about scope?
I think it has, but it's something. It was a code example, so it's this one. So they have to like take a pen and paper and like figure out what is going to. It's just what you explained before around the scope.
I think we can move on to the groups.
يبدا الشغل بالتفكير بس هذا البداية
Yeah, I think this exam right now around the for loop thing is because it takes a little while for it's a little minutes, so it's a little while for I want to upload. But until then, I just like explain around the for loop because it's not very complicated as such about the block and the school.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm just explaining that right now. All right, so. Now I'm going to explain about the for loop. So now I'm going to explain about around the for loop. And loops in general are useful if you want to execute the same line of code a number of times continuously. And there are many types of loops, but today we're going to focus around the for loop. And the for loop is something in JavaScript where you loop through a block of code a number of times. So to give you like a very basic example, let's say we want to loop get numbers from 0 to 10. We want to log all of them out instead of writing them manually. So this is like a for loop, and it's based on three things. So first off, we have the initialization. This is where you declare a variable and give it a value, and then we have the condition, and this is where you compare to something else, and based on that, it's going to execute some code. And lastly, we have the initialization, the part where it gets run. So this example shows like we create a variable called index. We give it the value of 0. Then we take that variable and we say if this index, if it's less than 10, then we want to get all numbers from 0 to 10. So if I try to run it using console.log, then you can see we get all numbers from 0 up to 9. And I can change it again. I can say from 0 to, I don't know, 200. Then you can see it starts to log out all the numbers from 0 to 200.
Saves a lot of time.
It saves a lot of time, and it can be used for anything. So yeah, and you can also like.
Is it the same if I want to write plus before index or?
The plus what it means is like it's going to increment it by 1. So.
I know that, but I mean it's okay if I write it before index or I should write after index.
It should be after.
It should be after, yeah, exactly. Because this is where the power is. It starts to, based on the condition, to execute the code. So what the plus plus means is it's going to increment it by 1. So every time the condition hasn't been met on every time the index is less than 200, it's going to add it by 1 and add by 1 until we reach our point. So yeah, and you can also do like say if it's less than or equal to, then it's going to hit top 200. So this is like a very basic example of how you want to use the for loop. And yeah, then we have an exercise and around the loop. So just find it here. Spring logger. So based on this, now I want you to create a loop that logs out the numbers from the 75 to 98. So that's something you can try out right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll give you like 5 minutes to do it. So.
I have just a question about the last of the defining the variable. Can you send us more resource to study the function?
Yes.
Is everyone done?
Yes.
Cool. So now I can show the same example. So the task was we wanted to create a loop that logs out the numbers from 75 to 98. So what we can do is we have to log out the number from 75 to 98. So in the initial value, we have to write the 75, and then in the comparison, we have to compare it to 98. And if I try to console log it, you can see we get every number from 75 to 98. So this is like a simple exercise. Yeah. Then, so.
What is the thing with loops? Why are they seem to be so important?
What do you think we can use loops for in the concepts that we've learned before? If we think about it for indexes, if you have an array of 1,000, this helps you go to the indexes so you can access all of the items in the array, for example. Loops and arrays are very much tied together because it's a way to go through the entire thing.
Can I loop an array?
Yeah.
You can. And it's mainly used for something like, I could imagine like in a database where you have to sort through a bunch of data. In most cases, it would be suitable to use a for loop to loop through all that instead of manually getting all of the data out. Exactly.
Could you loop through an array just quickly so we can see how it's done? If you create an array outside
So we can create an array
before the for loop.
for loop. Okay. Call it R. Be a bunch of numbers. 5.
And so what do you think, where do we start the index if we want to loop through an array? Like,
Zero.
yeah. So instead of 74, we start at 0.
And then we have 2.
And then we need to go all the way up to the last element. And how do we know what that index will be? We've been doing that a couple of times now.
Point length -1.
Exactly. So we start at 0. The condition is keep going until you are at the length -1, because we know that's the last element, and increment by 1 every time you pass through it.
So now you can see I just made a quick example of looping through an array. So we have a bunch of numbers from 1 to 10. And now you can say we have the first part, the initialization, we start from 0 because we want to get every single number inside the array. And then we take this index and compare it with the array.length. So we compare it with every number that's inside of here. And next we want to like loop through it and execute it, and thereby outputting all of the numbers inside of the array. So you can see right here.
Well, we're right now, this is just putting the index. How do we access the element inside the array?
We give a specific index, like 3 different index. Yeah.
So if you put R and then index inside the...
Index now.
Yeah. Can you write index instead of 0?
Yes.
So there we're saying, we're in here, index is 0. Was the array in index 0? It's 1. And you can see it in the first then. And then we do the same for index 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're printing undefined. What do you think that is? In which index are we on?
11.
Because it make it -1?
Yeah.
We're on index 10.
Yes.
How many indexes do we have in an array that has the length of 10? 9. It goes up until 9 because we start at 0. If we have 10 elements, we go 0, 1, 2, 3. And so right now we were going all the way to array in index 10, and that didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So you could there are 2 ways to write this conditional. You can do less than or equal to r.length -1, or you can not compare to the array.length, and so then it won't go in.
Mm.
Can we make that an array of strings, just that it's...
Sure. So the car example again,
Yeah.
because I can't think of anything else.
I can only think of my name, so... Yeah, I think 3 is good. And so there we go through all of them. And here, we're not defining, go all the way up to 3 or to 2. It's depending on the length of the array. So an array could be 1, Yeah, it's everything that's in it. Can you make it just one, like just one element inside the array? Yeah. So it goes in, index is 0. Is index less than, what's the length? 1. Is it less than 1? Yes, we go in. And then we increment by 1. Index is now 1. Is index less than 1? No. They're the same, and we're not comparing the equals, so we're done. Yeah.
I'm having a small confusion here because I have the array defined, and then I put for let index. So index there, it's not a variable, it's a function.
It's a variable.
It's a variable, just change it manually.
But we are changing it inside the function.
Yes, we're changing it inside the for loop.
Because there's no other index outside the...
Exactly. It's
so
just...
I define it and I do it inside the for.
Yes.
But in the if statement, I couldn't do that, right?
No. So the for is built so that it takes 3 things. The assignment of the variable that is going to change, the validation for when to go into the next step, and what to do when this validation passes. In our case, we say, we start with 0, keep going until you are the array's length, and if that condition is true, increment my index by 1. But this is the way that we built it. We could say, you know, if this is the 4, and instead of incrementing it by 1, decrease it by 1. So this is that you build the for loop with your conditional and what you want to happen with that conditional. The most common way to do it is the index that we did before. So you increment it by 1 and you loop through it until you're in the last element of your array. But it's a very specific, like only the for loop behaves this way.
And something I just noticed right now, I did a bit of mistake. So you can see right here, it says 6,875. So it logs up every single time. So that's something to keep in mind with the for loop. You have to watch out for because sometimes if you don't define your conditions and set it up like properly, it can like crash your browser and like make it lag because it keeps on logging. So yeah, there's something to keep in mind.
You need to make sure that the condition that you have in the for loop will end at some point, because otherwise it will go on forever. Yep.
So for the exercise, remember this exercise optional to make a combination of numbers?
Yeah.
I could use the loop for it, and it's gonna the for loop for it. So remember that you need to have like 10 elements and combine to make a startup random names.
Yeah.
So I can use that function, but if I put the for, if I put it in the for, I'm gonna get all the possible combinations of it.
Yes. Yep. You could do that.
So then I can just
go crazy.
It all.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's.
The for loop is extremely useful, especially combined with arrays, because if you have, for example, 2 arrays, you can have 2 for loops together and mix that as well.
Can I put 2 arrays? No, I can't. 2 arrays in one for?
2 arrays in one for? Yes. Yep. Because you're only changing the index. They would have to be the same length, but you could manipulate both of them at the same time if they are the exact same length, because otherwise one may go out of bounds and the other one can still keep going. Yep. So yeah, there's an exercise. Yeah. So for loop in a function. Oh, it's okay. I'll get it. I just sent it in the channel. So if you think about it, we're now, the for loop also takes in conditionals that we saw last week and this week.
How did you fix your system when it was counting?
You need to close the tab.
I just closed it like.
System got stuck and
Sometimes that's the only thing that you can do. Yeah.
Just close the whole browser. Just shut everything down.
Yeah, it can crash your browser. Yeah. This is the power that you have now. Yeah. Yeah, so this for loop in a function, you can start by yourselves and then we can do it together. So it's create a function that takes 2 parameters, the string to log and the number of times to log it. Right? When calling the function, it should log out, the string that you pass in. So in this example, the function is called log string. You send in the string that you want to print and the number of times that you want to print that. So yeah, you can start by yourselves and then we can do it together. Does the exercise make sense? Do you know what to do? Create a function, 2 parameters, use the for loop.
Inside the function.
Fine.
I'm going to upload the video file. Do we have like a place where you can upload it? Or do you make it?
Just on Slack.
Slack, cool.
Do you want to do it together? Or do you want to try?
I'm confused between it is saying us to create a loop that logs out the number from 74 to 98. It's clear.
Yeah.
But then it says again, for loop in a function, make a for loop, and in which we have to create two parameters. One is string to log.
Yep.
And one is number of times to log.
Yeah.
So I think it makes number of times to log to 98. That's why I'm confused.
So it needs to be, it's just the number of times that you want the string to be printed. Yeah, it can be any number. Yeah.
And then what is this 74 to 98?
No, that is a separate one. It's a separate one. It's a
Yeah.
separate exercise.
We did that together. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole new exercise.
You have 1 minute.
We can like take a look around because
Yeah. I'm gonna give you 3 more minutes to do it together, and then we can do it. I mean, to do it on your own, and then we can do it together.
I don't think I'm getting the logic on how to do it.
Of the exercise or of the for loop?
Like, no sé cómo pensarlo. Because I write things, for example, now I can see I'm doing errors and yeah.
Remember to be very patient with yourself and with your computer, because this is
Yes, you
this
can
is
hurt somebody.
this is someone speaking in a language that you don't understand. It's exactly like that. So you need to, or I'm impatient with myself as well, and the only way to handle it is just like, okay, let me read this slowly and calm down. Otherwise, you just get frustrated.
Exactly, you just start getting panicky.
Yeah, it's like I don't know anything.
Now I'm doing this.
It's going to be
In this case, it will return nothing. Because we're just logging stuff, so we don't need to return anything in this function. It's okay. Yeah, yeah. Yes.
And what about this?
Let's do it together. Okay. Okay, let's do it together. So, create a function that has, I think the function is called log string. Takes 2 parameters, string to log, and number of times to log. The string to log is what we're going to print. Number of times to log, number of times to print it. And so, what would be, without knowing the for loop, how could you do this? What would be the first thing? Like, imagine we forgot about for loops. How could you do it before? If this number was 10, we would need to do string to log like multiple times, right? We would need to do maybe have a counter and an if statement and stuff like that, right? But we know about for loops now. And for loops, again, consists of 3 things. The index, which is we're initializing a variable that starts where we want to start, the conditional that needs to be met for us to keep iterating on in the for loop,
Number of
3 times, yes.
and what do we need to compare against in the conditional? We want to keep going until,
It finds that condition.
and what would be that conditional for us?
In this, what we pass in the
Number of times.
Number
to
of
log.
times to log,
Number
right?
of times to log.
We want to keep going until our index is
Yeah.
equal to the number of times to log. And so if I is 0
Mhm.
and 0 is less than number of times to log, then we keep going, right?
Yes.
If number of times to log is 2,
To keep going to them.
we say, do we want to compare just if it's less than or equal to as well?
We decide that.
We decide, but how do we decide?
So it should be less because we already know that in the 0 to 5
Yes.
is going to be 9. So it has to be smaller.
So it has to be smaller.
Yes.
What do you think? I really want to understand how you think about
No,
this.
it's just going to be less than number of times because, for
Wait.
example, now I pass maybe my name is Pati and number of times 3. It's going to be I less than 3. So the loop will run I is equal to 0, I is equal to 1, I is equal
Yes.
to 2.
Yes. What do you think we would need to do if we start with 1?
So it has to
Add
be
one.
equal.
Then we need to compare with
With
equals,
equal,
right?
Yes.
So again, many ways to do it.
Mhm.
This is the one that we start with, makes the most sense to us. If this condition is true, we will execute whatever we have in here and then
Plus,
increment
plus.
this by 1. And remember that this is the same as this,
Plus.
Yeah.
but this just looks way cooler.
Mhm.
And so we have the for loop, the structure that we need to do, and this is gonna, let's just right now,
String to log.
yeah. We don't need to do this because we're only console logging. Do we need to return anything in this function?
Determine. For now.
Since this function only requires us to log, we don't need to return anything. We just want to see the stuff in there. And so we're going to call our function log2string with JavaScript is great. And we want to do that 10 times. Let's go back to our index. Yeah, well, the console does this, but here it is, 10 times. 10, JavaScript is great. I wonder if I can do this, like, not repeat this group similar, yeah. Just doesn't care about that.
I think it's what is offered to you with that. Not change it.
Group similar? Yeah, no, it doesn't care. Well, here it is, 10 times. Let's just change that to make sure. Let's say 100. 100 times. And so we made the condition. Let's just make it do something wrong so we understand that now it's 99. Why? Because
One is
we're
counting.
now starting from 1. We're comparing. And so when it hits 99, it will check, is it, no, actually when it checks, yeah, 90, yeah, yeah, it started with 1, and so it will do it 99 times, yes.
I have a small confusion again.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it asking us to do the string we input and the number of the string and then the number we put like 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2 index of that string?
Is the exercise asking you that? Is that so?
Yeah.
Let's read it. Create a function. When calling the function, it should log out the string to log and the amount of times specified in number of times to log. The amount of times specified. So how do you read that? Do you think it should log the index or?
How I did that, like string to log, and then I input the I,
Yeah.
like the number.
Yeah.
And then it printed that.
And that's good because then it won't group the similar here. Yep. I mean, it doesn't matter how you log it.
Wait, can I see?
No, it's like I inputted that hello word string,
Mm-hmm.
and then I passed that another like hello word and 3. I passed 2 arguments in that function, and
Yeah.
what it gives me like HEL because it was 3.
Because you have stored it in an array or something like
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we're not using arrays. Because what we don't need to get the length of anything. We already have exactly the number of times that we want to log this to. If the exercise was like log it the length of this array, then we would need to do the length and actually do that. But we are just asking like how many times do you want this to be logged. So we don't need to care about arrays right now. The same string. Yeah, exactly. Or we can change the string, like I just appended the I so that we know which index it's on. And now it won't group them because they're different strings. And we can see here that we started with 0. And the index ends up at 99, even though it's 100, because it's not falling into that conditional, right? Let's just do it the other way around so that we know, like...
Okay, now I need a moment.
Yep.
I'm not logging it. I can't log it, so maybe I did something wrong. I'm just reviewing the function. Just a second.
Yeah.
Why it's not duplicated from just give the value of the number instead of just like this? Why when I, for example, hello 6, why you got 6 mean not repeat 6 times?
It's what's happening the same to me. Because it groups them because it's the same thing.
Yes.
And so it just thinks that you don't want to see all of them in the console. But so if you do what I did there, like you can just append
inside the loop.
Yeah, inside the loop, because then the string is different, and so it won't do that.
Okay.
Because it will be like hello 1, hello 2, hello 3, and so you can see all of them. You can, yes, if you do... The backtick, that one?
Do the same thing.
Yeah.
Do same thing to this one.
And then you need to put that inside the dollar sign. And then curly braces.
Oh.
And then just add like,
So many mistakes. I don't even get to search.
Yeah, but it's option.
let's just bring the index. And then, because it's not the same one, it just brings it separately. But it's just a thing of the console that it thinks you don't want to see the 6. It just groups it because it's the same string.
Okay.
Are there any questions about this exercise? No? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
We're gonna do the last one. This one. I think this one, we'll do it together because we're running out of time. So it's to send emails. And it says, imagine we work at a company. Peter from HR wants us to send out a couple of emails to some people. The problem is that he sent us the email in a weird format. And so he sent us this. I'm going to copy that string. As you can see, it's just a bunch of emails separated by the pipe, which is what we use for the OR. And so we have the emails. That string. Use the send email to function to send an email to all of the recipients that we got, and then this should return this log email sent to this recipient. And it says, use the split method and look up iterating an array.js for loop on Google. We know how to iterate on an array already. We sort of did that because we know we need to do that. To iterate on an array, we just need to get the elements of the array on the index. So we just change the index. We say we have that array on 0, 1, 2, 3, up until the last element. And so we have this string, and it says something about the split method. The split method takes in one argument, and it receives a string, and it will say that whenever he sees that string, which is the separator, it will create another element. And so let's just see that in the console so that I can remember if this works like this. So I'm going to say ABC, and if I say split, and I send in the character that I want to split that string by, that returns an array of everything that was separated. So it keeps going. I find this separator. I create a new element in the array. I keep going.
Or commas or
Exactly. Yeah. If I do this with commas, for example,
they put in
and I say split by the comma, the same array will be returned. So I want to do something like this, right? We have these emails, and this function email sent to was already pre-built, and it takes in one email at a time. And so we have this emails array. We want to say that I'm going to be creating a bunch of variables, and then we can clean it up together. Emails separated.
This is not an array already, right?
This is not an array already, no. But if we use the split with this as the separator, emails, actually I'll rename this as emails array. This will now be an array of all of the emails. Let's log it to see that we're doing okay. I'll just comment this out. No, not this. We now have an array of all of the emails. The length is 7. Okay. And we said that this function takes in one at a time. So we need to call the function in our for loop. Does that make sense? We need to go through the array and call the function once for each email that we have. So we have an array, and we know how to loop through the array. We're going to have...
It should be inside the function, right?
Well, we could create another function, but this one takes in only one email at a time. So I'm going to do the for before. Going to do the same thing again. I'm going to start with 0. And this time, it's important that I start with 0 because we're talking about indexes of an array. And so the indexes of an array start with 0. Until this is less than
minus 1.
Array dot length.
emails array dot length. Is that spelled correctly? Length minus 1. And then I++, right? Is that correct? Let's log the index to make sure this should go from 0 to 6 because there's 7, right? Or is it? Let's print the length. It's 7, so we're missing 1. So if we're starting by 0, we need to compare also that it's equal. Because length minus 1, it's 6. Yeah, and the index 6, we do want to get to that. So, yes, it's 7. We're looping from 0 to 6. Now, let's just do emails array on I. Because that's how we access elements inside the array. Do you remember? So what is this doing? This is doing emails array on 0, and then on 1, and then on 2, and then on 3, etc. Let's just log them. Yes? All good? So we're doing this correctly. And what we want to do is we want to call that function with the email that we're at in the index. So we have the function already. We're going to say send email to, and the email that we're going to send is the one that we're at right now. I'm going to remove this log. So what's happening? How many times is the function being called?
-1, so 6.
7.
This function is being called 7 times. First with this, then with this, then with this, etc., until it reaches the last element of the array. Are there any questions on this?
Just a second, I had
We had to do this one a little bit fast, but if you have questions, let me know. Yeah.
We have so many questions. So much.
Questions, exactly. Like, I just need to process it again. So, and then, like, yeah, I can make a list.
Yes. But in this, like 1, 2, if we remove the comments, like in this, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines of code, we're using everything you've learned about JavaScript so far. Variables, functions, conditionals, arrays, and loops. In this tiny thing, including a new thing, like the split function as well. Yeah. If you have questions about your homework, remember that to reach out to me directly. Otherwise, I lose it. I won't see it. I won't see the message if you don't send it to me, like to my name. But there's other people helping out with the homework that will give you feedback. Yeah, the homework is in the website. It has. If there's something that we didn't cover, reach out to me if you have any questions. And thank you for today.
Thank you.
Yeah. Carol G.
Eller de kan si
No dijeron esa canadiense.
en halfback.
¿De qué era?
No sé, pero no es en halfback.
Bueno.
Ok, maar dit hangt dus bij het Thriller Park Boys. Dat weet je niemand, right?
No.
Dus dat is goed.